Sacramento Kings Media Day has wrapped up, and it really does feel like the NBA season is right around the corner. Media Day is always the marker for that, and this Media Day has me very excited. For some reason, it was just when I was watching Drew Eubanks get interviewed, and he just started talking about like playing in Golden One Center and playing in front of the crowd. For some reason, it was that moment that just started to get me excited about watching this team again. I think for some reason it being Drew Eubanks, just like kind of the random NBA player, the classic, just like solid dude who's like not a star and is just going to be a rotational player. For some reason, just seeing that guy be in a Kings jersey, a new player, talk about playing in Golden One Center, that's really what got me excited because it's like, yeah, I really never care about like who is on this team, like who it truly is. Just as long as they're in a Kings jersey, like I'm gonna be excited about it, no matter what. So I got excited about that. The Kings announced their training camp roster. All the usual guys you would expect the roster that the Kings have. The one guy that was added that I didn't know was going to be on there was Dexter Dennis. And Dexter Dennis didn't even play with the Kings in Summer League, which I was sad about at the time. Thought he was gone from the Kings organization, but he's back. He's on the training camp roster after he helped lead Stockton to that G League championship. So that's cool that he's on the training camp roster. And we got the coaching staff, and we kind of learned more about the roles of the coaching staff in Doug Christie's interview. He said that Mike Woodson is the associate head coach, Bobby Jackson is running the defense, and Mike Miller, no, not that one. Mike Miller is going to be the one running the offense. So we got interviews from Doug Christie, Scott Perry, all the players. So I'm going to be talking about all of those interviews. We also saw the Kings' new jersey and also the new patch, the sponsorship patch that they have on their jersey, Fong Law. Maybe now we can, reach out to them, reach out to Ann Fong, and sue the Kings for emotional distress that we have during the season. But I thought the new jerseys looked nice. I was liking it. I thought it looked pretty good. But from the interviews with Doug Christie and Scott Perry, we heard the classic stuff, right? From Scott Perry, it was nothing new. It's what we've heard the second since he got here, all about identity and building a foundation and his, 6 keys that I can't remember because like who can remember 6 things? Team play, I can't remember any of them, literally. But his, 6 pillars that he has or whatever, he's talking about that. And of course, talking about how there's no better ambassador for Kings basketball and for the Kings organization than Doug Christie. And I agree with him on that. It was exciting to, hear Doug Christie talk about going into his first full season as an NBA head coach and as the Kings head coach. And the main points that he hit on were just, of course, defense first in a transition style. And he wants layups and threes off of paint touches. And that was obviously something that he and Scott Perry have emphasized. All of the players really talked about the certain style that really Scott Perry is bringing to the team and the structure that he's bringing, and like how Scott Perry is the guy that's guiding this organization, right? He's like the one figure that's guiding it. That's great. That's what we want to hear, right? Like there's one voice, everyone's listening to that voice, and we have one direction. And so it's great to hear that. But of course, like it has to be proven, especially over a long period of time, whether that's actually the case. But it's nice to hear that at least. And also hearing that the way that the Kings want to play is a transition style defense first. Like that's great, right? And when you think about this Kings roster, like Sabonis and Levine, they fit perfectly into a transition offense system. Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis, Keegan Murray, those guys really fit into a transition style offensively and defensively, right? Getting steals and deflections and forcing turnovers to be able to get out in transition. That's great, right? So really a lineup of Schroeder, Keon, Keegan, Levine, Sabonis, like that fits that style and that identity. But then there are other certain players who maybe it doesn't fit as much. Obviously, I'm looking at DeMar DeRozan, like let's be honest. And that's, what we've talked about all offseason, how a lot of the Kings roster has a certain way that they best fit into a certain style of play that they best fit into. And then DeMar DeRozan just seems to kind of be the odd man out in terms of that style of play. And so it's all great to talk about this certain style of play that you want to have, but we need to see it actually implemented. Because how is it actually going to be implemented when you have a player like DeMar DeRozan who maybe doesn't fit into that? So either DeMar really has to commit to being a part of that, which even if he commits, like at the end of the day, DeMar is who he is. It's kind of going to be hard to fundamentally change who he is. Or Doug Christie has to make some tough decisions and leave him on the bench at certain points to really be able to play this certain style. And so that's just something that we're going to have to wait and see, what happens, how Doug Christie is able to lead this team and how committed he is to this style and how committed he is to the style versus playing certain players. Another thing Doug Christie said is he wanted to run a 10-man rotation, right? He wants a 10-man rotation because he wants an intense style of play and he wants all-out effort at all times. So he wants to be able to sustain that by playing 5 guys off the bench. A couple other things that he talked about. He said that Keegan should smile, defend, and shoot. Like, those are the 3 things that Keegan needs to do next season. I found that kind of funny, but also we're just having Keegan defend and shoot. I don't know. That was like a bit of a red flag when I heard that. Like, okay, Keegan's just back to sitting in the corner, I guess. Which, like, in all honesty, that's probably Keegan's best role. If he's going to be on a contending team, that's going to be his role. But is that what we want him doing now? Or do we want him trying to expand his game a little bit this season? I want him to be expanding his game. Now, in his interview, he did talk about how he has been given freedom. But, just when Doug Christie said that he just wants Keegan to shoot threes and defend, it's like, okay, like that's okay, but I would like a little more out of Keegan when he is at his best, in his best position in the NBA. Sure, that is probably what he's going to be doing, just shooting threes and defending. But let's see if we can expand his game a little bit. I don't think we really have anything to lose by seeing if Keegan can expand his game a little bit. Doug also mentioned that he's comfortable handing the ball to Dennis Schroeder, right? Handing the ball to Dennis Schroeder as a point guard and as a leader. And he likes Dennis Schroeder's demeanor, that Schroeder's not going to back down, and then he understands shot profile, and then he sets a defensive tone at the point guard position. There was a ton of talk about Dennis Schroeder from all the players. Everyone was talking about Dennis Schroeder coming in and being that point guard, being the only point guard on the team. I mean, that was something Devin Carter said, where he was like, yeah, Dennis Schroeder is like the only guy who is really labeled as a point guard on this team. So that backup point guard position is kind of up for grabs. But everyone was talking about how it's nice to be able to have a guy like Dennis Schroeder, a vet point guard who just understands the game and who also is going to get into it defensively. And that was something that we heard from quite a few players. Like Keon Ellis mentioned that just learning from a guy like Dennis Schroeder to be able to learn certain aspects defensively from him. The last thing that I really heard from Doug Christie that interests me was that he said it's about who finishes a game, not who starts the game. And really what he said is we're here to finish games, not start them. And I'm like, is that really the quote we want to be going with? Like, don't we want to start games as well? I feel like we should want to start games, in a good spot with a good lineup that's going to set the tone. I was a little weird, that quote. Like, really, we're just here to finish games. He was obviously being asked about certain lineups and if he knew what his starting lineup was and whatever. And he was just talking about it's about who finishes the game. And while there's some truth to that, no doubt there's some truth to the sentiment that it's more important who finishes the game than who starts the game, but it also matters who starts the game. And to me, that was just kind of saying, like, we know what the starting lineup is going to be, and it's really not going to change. And we're just going to run that starting lineup out there, and then maybe we'll make some changes throughout the game. And then who ends the game is going to be different, but we're still going to always be starting with a certain starting lineup just because we kind of have to, right? Keon Ellis isn't going to get into the starting lineup. Malik Monk isn't going to get into the starting lineup most likely. Like, we know who's going to be starting these games. But that's pretty much it for Doug Christie. We move on to the players, and the players, DeMar DeRozan is really where it gets interesting. Most of the players' interviews were kind of your basic answers, your media practiced answers, you know, nothing too interesting. DeMar DeRozan was the guy who, like, he kept it real. He talked about how the summer went by really fast. He also talked about how last year was a shit show, right? That was the word he used. He cussed quite a lot in his interview. I don't think anyone else cussed at all, not that I remember. And he was just out there with the, you know, the swears were flying with him. He was not happy about last year. You know, everyone else had their positive mindset going into next season, but no one had the, you know, no one talked for real about last season like DeMar DeRozan. Like, sure, Sabonis said a few things, but that was only because someone framed a question as DeMar talked about how last season was so horrible. And then Domas was just like, I mean, yeah, it was. You know, like, DeMar was coming out here and not even really being asked about it. Like, he didn't have to answer like this, and he was just talking about how horrible last season was. And all it made me think of was like, man, what 1 year in a Kings jersey does to a guy. This guy is, we broke him. 1 year in a Kings jersey and this dude is broken. He is a guy who wrote a book on mental health. It doesn't matter. Like, we broke this guy in 1 year. Even, you know, Zach LaVine hasn't been here for very long, but something he was talking about, he was like, man, when I came here and played against the Kings as a Bull, he shot 10 free throws in a game. Then when I got here, I never shot 10 free throws in a game. I'm like, yeah, these guys, they quickly realize what it's like to be a Sacramento King. But DeMar's main point was like, he had to change his mindset. Like, he really kept things real in his interview. Changing his mindset, not taking things for granted. Like, he wasn't himself last year, and he has the opportunity to change that mindset and make things right. He said he wasn't a good enough leader last year, and now he's putting himself into that right mindset to be a leader. I mean, he was pretty much referring to last season as being in an abusive relationship where it's like, you don't know how bad it is until you get out of it. Like that. Like, wow, okay. He said he always wanted to come back to the Kings and never thought about leaving or anything like that. And when Zach LaVine was asked about if he liked being the underdog, if he liked or what he thought about, you know, people not having high expectations for the Kings, Zach LaVine's answer was, I don't care. I do not care at all. I'm just going to go out and play the games. DeMar's answer was like, man, that pisses me off, you know? That was something that I mentioned recently in one of my videos where I was talking about how this season really is a chance for certain players to change the narrative about themselves and the team as a whole to change the narrative. Like, nobody believes in this team. And so they should come together against the haters, right? And have that underdog mentality and use that as a weapon. And DeMar definitely seems like he is using that as motivation for himself coming into this next season. But DeMar pretty much promised that you're going to see a different team this coming year because there's not as much chaos like there was last year. When he was talking about how disappointing last season was, like when it ended, how it didn't end how they wanted it to, I was just thinking for a second, I'm like, I can't even remember how last season ended. Like, for a good 5 seconds, I just sat there like, what happened? What even was the end of last season? I couldn't remember. I literally could not remember how last season ended. I went to the last game of the season. I went to that play-in game against the Mavericks. Man, it must have been so traumatic that my brain just like pushed it out. Because when he was talking about that, my mind literally went blank. Like, I could not even remember how last season ended. Because it was, like DeMar said, a shit show. And so my brain must have just pushed that out. Like, I don't even want to remember it. And so now this upcoming season is a chance to make it right and a chance to prove people wrong. I already talked about what Zach LaVine said a little bit, but a little bit more on him. He said that there's a singular voice now within the organization and a singular direction. And that comes from Scott Perry. So like I said earlier, like, that's nice to hear. It is. Is it the truth, or is it going to, is it going to stay that way? That remains to be seen, right? That has to be proven over a long period of time. But at least it is nice to hear that there, at least for some time, there's going to be one voice and one guy who is directing this team. But Levine was really just hyping up the defensive guys. Keon Ellis, Devin Carter, Dennis Schroeder, Keegan Murray. And he was saying like the Kings could be a good defense with these guys, and they need to be a good defense because defense is about understanding your team's weaknesses. Like, what are the things he said? He's like, I'm not going to be Kawhi overnight, but it's about understanding your weaknesses and playing around that. And that's definitely something the Kings need to do because the Kings have a lot of defensive weaknesses, but they also have some good defensive players like he listed. So I think especially when it comes to regular season games, if this team has enough defensive players to be a solid defense if everything goes right, if everyone buys in, if everyone's together and really committed. And that's why, they need to have this underdog mentality. And if they really commit to that underdog mentality, then maybe the defense can actually hold up a little bit. The other main interview that interested me was the Malik Monk interview because he took so many questions about what was it like being in trade rumors, because obviously he's been in the Jonathan Kuminga trade rumors a lot, and he's been in trade rumors previously. And he was just like, if my agent doesn't call me, then I'm not worried about it. He said that there was one time at the trade deadline where, like, if it was going to happen, it was going to happen then. It didn't happen. So now he's not worried about it. And he bought a house in Sacramento, and Sacramento's home. I love Monk. I love how much he likes being in Sacramento. It sure does feel like the Kings organization is probably going to screw him over here. Because, I mean, he talked about how, the Kings organization showed me how much they value me last season. I got to start and whatever. It's like, for me, I feel like the Kings organization is kind of showing him how much they don't value him by, first of all, bringing in DeMar DeRozan, then bringing in Zach LaVine, then bringing in Dennis Schroeder. You drafted Devin Carter, right? You still have Keon Ellis. For me, I feel like the Kings organization is telling him like, hey, we don't value you, and you are probably getting traded at some point. And so that's, just when he said, he's like, I bought a house, I bought some acres, is what he said. I was just like, man, I really hope he doesn't get traded, right? I mean, for multiple reasons. He loves being in Sacramento. I would love if he could be a King for life. It just doesn't feel like that's going to happen. And so, Scott Perry obviously told Monk that he seems to be fine for now and that he's not getting traded. I mean, Monk didn't completely specify what he was told by Scott Perry and his agent, but it seems like he's relatively safe according to them, according to what they are saying to him. So maybe he really is safe, but man, it feels like he's expendable to the Kings. And so just hearing him in his interview and talking about how much he loves being in Sacramento and how it is a home to him and how he bought a home. It's like, man, it's going to be heartbreaking if he does get traded. But the on-court thing that Monk talked about improving was focusing on catch and shoot three-pointers. Improving that three-point percentage on the catch and shoot. And I mean, that's exactly what he needs to improve on. Because he hasn't shot well from three. Especially last year, he didn't shoot well from three. And he needs to be a threat out there. Because if he's going to be playing off-ball alongside of guys like DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine who like to have the ball, then he needs to be a threat from beyond the arc. And I mean, that would be, if he could improve that up to 36, 37%, that's going to help the Kings a lot. So I'm glad that he seems to have his focus in the right direction there. The other things that we heard about a lot throughout Media Day, everyone hyping up Dennis Schroeder, everyone hyping up what he did with Germany over the summer, obviously winning MVP at Eurobasket and winning that gold medal. Everyone talking about how much a dog he is defensively at the point of attack and how he's going to set the tone defensively, be a leader, not back down. Keegan said Dennis Schroeder's going to tell you like it is. He's going to play with pace. He's going to pick up 94 feet. Sharing the ball, play fast, shoot threes, fun basketball. Like, that's what Dennis Schroeder emphasized. So, yeah, a lot of people hyping up Dennis Schroeder. That's what you, of course, love to hear. A lot of people also hyping up Nick Clifford as well. When everyone talked about Nick Clifford, it was always about how he's got an NBA ready body, how he's NBA ready. As an older rookie, he has the ability to make an impact right away, especially with that NBA ready body. That's what Levine talked about in regards to Nick Clifford. Malik Monk talked about that as well. And then just some quick fire interesting things, or things that I found interesting from the rest of the interviews. Keegan wants to shoot over 40% from three and get on the most improved list. And he talked about how he's now the second longest tenured player on this Kings team, or at least tied with like Keon, I guess. Maybe there's some technicalities about when they sign their contracts, but pretty much tied there for second longest tenured player. He doesn't want to worry about his contract. Keon pretty much had the same sentiment, that they're not worried about their contract years. Not surprising that they're not going to talk about that much. But Keegan said it's the first year where he has like no strings attached offensively and he has complete freedom. Keon Ellis talked about how he wants to improve not just as a catch and shoot shooter, but as an off the dribble shooter coming around screens. And he doesn't want to let defenders that defend him just have the night off. He wants to be more of a movement guy and be able to do more with the ball. And he also says he still hasn't tuned into any Doug Christie film, and was quoted saying Doug Christie was probably a good defender. Which I love. I love that he's never going to watch this Doug Christie film as much as he says he will. Domantas Sabonis talked about how he wants his three-point attempts to go up. He's working on a quicker release, and he's going to be operating in different areas in the offense. He's going to be operating more behind the three-point line. He's going to be trying to pull opposing defenders out further, and he is going to be operating with the ball in different spots on the court. Nick Clifford said he hated the Lakers even though he grew up watching Kobe. Now he hates the Lakers. Maxime Renaud said that Zach LaVine loaned him his car because Renaud had to take a driving test. That was hilarious to me. Dario Saric talked about getting into a rhythm over the summer with the national team. That's good for him because he did not play a lot of games last season, so he needed that. Drew Eubanks talked about liking having a player coach, and he was not the only one to talk about how he liked having, Doug Christie being a former player as a head coach, because player coaches allow you to make more mistakes. They allow you to miss shots and not be a perfect player, and it's still okay. I also kind of found it funny when he said like, oh, this roster is super talented, and then like 2 seconds later was like, it's not the team that's the most talented that wins. It's the team that's the most connected, which is very true. But is this Kings team going to be the one that's most connected? Hopefully. But the way it's built, that's going to be the big question mark. It's not about the talent. It is about being connected. And so he's very right in that, although I don't think he didn't necessarily mean it how I'm taking it, where it's like, yeah, the Kings team is talented, but maybe not connected. Like, he meant it more as they are very connected, right? He thinks they are going to be connected and be able to compete with even more talented teams. That's obviously a big question mark for me and for everyone, I think, but we'll see. Doug McDermott said he got brought back to be a vet and give young guys feedback. So I thought that was cool. He's very much embracing the vet role. And then, yeah, the other young guys, I mean, we already heard from like Isaac Jones and Devin Carter so much during Summer League. It was all the same stuff for them. Devin Carter kind of echoed Drew Eubanks' sentiments about having Doug Christie as a coach, allowing him more freedom, the ability to make mistakes, the ability to gamble for steals, and it being okay. And so, it makes me think about like, okay, we just had Mike Brown. We're going from Mike Brown to Doug Christie, and that probably is a big difference. More mistakes are probably allowed. You're able to be a more gambly defender, take more chances. I think that's something that Mike Brown didn't necessarily like, especially in a guy in Keon Ellis. And one of the reasons why Keon probably didn't get as many minutes as he should have is because, I think Mike Brown didn't like how much he gambled. And so going from Mike Brown to Doug Christie, players are, going to get more freedom and be able to make more mistakes. So that is a wrap for Sacramento Kings 2025 Media Day. I am very hyped for the preseason, just around the corner, a little over a week away, getting into training camp here. I was thinking about doing a live stream, like kind of watch along for some of the preseason games. Not the first preseason game, maybe the second one, maybe like for the first half. So yeah, if you're interested, I'll probably be doing a live stream watch along for that second summer league game. Who knows? Maybe the whole thing, maybe just the first half. We'll see. So hope to see you guys there for that one. And anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. So I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.